We are back and we are joined by our beast of the week, journalist Abby Phillip. Abby joined CNN in 2017, first as the host of Inside Politics and now as host of CNN's Newsnight, which airs weeknights at 10 p.m. And she's the host of the digital service Table for Five. Abby is known for being one of the youngest people to ever moderate a Democratic presidential candidate debate, and currently does the not so simple task of reporting on the day's biggest stories while interviewing its biggest players. Abby, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Joanna and Sam.
Oh my gosh, what a pleasure. Okay, I have a very important question that I have to ask you right out of the gate, which is what in the world do you all talk about during commercial breaks? Because it gets so hot in there.
Well,
Oh,
Joanna's been there before, so she
yes.
knows. Sometimes it's eerily quiet,
Okay.
sometimes, but I would say most of the time people are like talking about a lot of random things, their kids, their pets, like their chickens, you know. It's like, I actually think that's what people don't get is how collegial people are when they're not screaming at each other on television. And so, sometimes also the debate like goes into the break. That also
That
happens.
happens. Okay, that makes sense. I feel like are people as collegial now as they used to be? Because that used to be just kind of the atmosphere in politics, that it was like fight, 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 but we're all kind of getting a drink after. Like everybody's meeting up at the bar for some dark liquor.
Yeah. Look, people are meeting up after the show for drinks. That is
Okay.
happening a
I-
lot.
I've never met anybody after the show for drinks. I just would like to say,
Joanna's never been invited.
yeah,
You're too
Michael has
cool.
never asked me for drinks. Scott Jennings never asked me for drinks. Just
Oh,
saying.
Well,
okay.
Cher Michael was on the show and recently and was like, um, said to someone on the air, "Oh, we text about this all the time." And I was like, "Huh? You guys are texting buddies?" On they were like completely opposites politically, but I also look, I think actually that before because I used to when I first started in journalism, it was like the before times. It was like
Right.
Obama and everybody was, to quote Pete Hegseth, go along to get along, whatever. I mean, people were just sort of chummy. And I actually think that there was not a lot of real disagreement. I think people kind of talk past each other on TV most times, which makes it really easy for people to then be like, okay, well, let's go to the bar and, hang out. I think what we do can be a lot tougher because sometimes we really are getting into it and people are honestly encouraged to get their disagreements out and to air the differences between them. And so when they do that and then they turn around and they can still talk to each other and they can still be friends. And I think that's actually a healthy sign.
Abby, sometimes I feel when I've done the show that especially the more right wing or the more conservative commentators are performing for an audience of one, and
Yeah.
that's the president. Do you get much feedback from the administration that they're watching the show?
I have heard from several people close to the administration that they do watch or that President Trump specifically watches. So great, cool. But look, I do think that it's not necessarily about our show. I think it's about Republican politics. Everybody is performing for an audience of one, which is Donald Trump. And so in Republican politics today, you can't really get caught if you want to be kind of MAGA aligned. You cannot get caught disagreeing with Trump publicly, or at least of all on television, or at least that's the perception that a lot of people have. That being said, some of the people who come on the show who are very close to Trump in the White House, David Urban, um, Brian Lanza, they, I think, have a bit of a balance. I think for the most part, maybe they're an 80, 85% MAGA aligned, but there are times when they can express disagreement. So I think it's just a fear thing, maybe that some people have, where they're like, they don't want to be seen as giving in to the left on television.
Right.
And so yes, but look, it's TV. I mean, I think that all of it is in a way a bit of a performance on the part of a lot of people that come on.
Yeah, I mean, well, for Donald Trump, it seems like the whole world, like the world that he has created is television. Everything is a television show for him. And so he watches those performances so keenly. Like I thought it was really telling that you couldn't even really get Scott Jennings to give you a yes or no answer on a very simple question the other day. Like it just about Jerome Powell.
Yeah. Should the Fed be independent or
Yeah.
not? You were like the consummate. I think of you as a dinner party host who remains calm while everybody else is yelling
Mhm.
around you. It's extraordinary the way you do that. But first of all, is Scott Jennings on Ozempic? Because he seems to have lost a lot of weight since he's been doing the show.
I have no idea.
I feel like he's really slimmed down.
I have no idea.
He's really lost some weight.
I don't want to speak for Scott on that. You should bring him on the show, Joanna, and ask him.
We totally should. Very good idea.
The stress of the show is not responsible for any weight loss, and I certainly have not lost any weight doing this show.
What is your guiding ethos? Like how do you I mean, I guess how do you set the schedule for the show? At what time do you decide what guests are gonna be on? What topics you're gonna cover? Like how is that
Yeah.
set? What is the technical
Usually around like 1 or 2 in the afternoon, my executive producer and I are kind of solidifying generally what we wanna do, but I actually usually hope that that changes because I don't like setting the show at like 10 in the morning
Right.
and then at 10 at night, it's the same show. I would much rather the show feel responsive and energetic and kind of like in the moment of what's happening and a little bit spontaneous because I think that's actually the important part of it is like, are we responding to what's happening in the news? Are we nimble? Are we able to really take on anything? And that's why our guests have to be people who can talk about anything. There are a lot of smart people out there on a whole host of topics, on politics, on whatever, but there are many fewer people who have that versatility across topics and who can talk culture, who can talk politics and economics and whatever, music.
This is making me feel better because I feel like I get the call from your show at about 5:36, and I always think to myself, "Oh, someone's fallen out. They're clearly desperate, and they've called me." But now I'm going to reinterpret it as, "Oh, they're trying to keep it spontaneous,
Yes.
and that's why they're putting it all together at the last minute." I will say it's enormous. It's enormous fun to do. But Abby, you're 36. How many of your friends do you know who watch television now? I feel like everybody gets their diet of news from TikTok. I want to know what your diet of news is.
Yeah. I mean, not even I watch television, to be honest.
You have to watch television, and the president watches television, right?
Right.
Which is audience of one. But the general viewership has shifted onto digital. Do you think that you'll still be doing this in 3 or 4 years' time? Or do you think you will have moved to TikTok?
Uh, I don't know if TikTok pays, to be honest, but look, I 3 to 4 years, something like this will be still going on for sure. But you're right. I mean, my peers are not watching TV. And I joke when I say I don't watch TV, but that's I mean, I have to watch some television, but if I were not, like, doing this, I think it would be hard to find the time to sit down in front of a TV and, sit there and watch it, and so I think a lot of my peers, when they watch my show, what they're watching are clips of my show online and on TikTok and on Instagram and on X and wherever. And that's cool too, because I actually think those platforms need to be fed by things like our show. Like they need the raw content to fuel those algorithms. Eventually, we're going to have to um, just be native on those platforms in a way that we are not right now. And that's going to happen very, very soon. I mean, do I think that CNN and cable are going away in less than 5 years? No, I really do not. It's almost like how when I was in college, everybody told me that newspapers like the New York Times and the Washington Post wouldn't exist. And then 5 years later, I was working at the Washington Post, and it had just been bought by Jeff Bezos and all of that. So I've seen these kind of evolutions of the medium, but I do think that we have to figure that other piece out, and trying to figure out how to not just go viral, but just create viral native things that start there first. And we haven't figured it out yet. It's easier said than done. And I think fundamentally the kind of content that works online is a little bit different, but something that we're doing is resonating because Newsnight clips go insanely viral all the
They
time.
really do. Yeah.
They go viral on the Beast. I mean, we run a lot of them
Yeah.
on the Daily Beast because our readers love them.
My only beef with that is like not the Daily Beast, but beef with the virality of certain clips is that it's so subjective to the ideology of the person clipping it. So the conservative clips go viral and then the liberal clips go viral. And I don't, as somebody who does the show, I don't think it's representative of what happens on the show. But I think that's how the internet works. And we have to figure out how to make that work in a way that I think best represents the totality of what we're producing.
You have such a, as Joanna was mentioning before, you have such a calming presence in the middle, and many of the interviews or like the panels just kind of erupt. I mean, they can be a little bit volcanic, and I wonder how hard you have to work sometimes to not dive into the emotion of it.
How many Xanax are you taking?
My God.
I would recommend having 5 siblings like I
Oh.
did and start there because I'm pretty used to kind of like being in the center of a cacophony. It's
Mhm.
just like what I'm used to. And so that is not, I think that's part of where it comes from is that chaos, I don't feel like I need to be in it necessarily. And also I don't want to stop the eruption from happening necessarily, right? Because this is real emotion, right? We want people to get real. And if they're worked up about it, so be it. The where I step in is to say, okay, shut up for a second. You guys are all talking at the same time. We cannot hear each other, that type of thing. And so I try to weigh my moments. But on the topic of like what gets me worked up, I would say the thing that gets me worked up is bad faith arguments more than anything else. I actually think it's totally cool to disagree on policy, priorities, strategy, whatever, right? What gets me irritated is when people are misleading or lying, or when I know that you know that what you're saying is not true, or that you really don't believe it, but you're saying it because it's something that is combative to say. And I think that's where you mentioned recently, the yes or no questions, right, are really problematic for people with political backgrounds because they don't ever want to say yes or no and be boxed in. But some things are yes or no. And
Yeah.
your inability to say that, I think, you're telling on yourself
Right.
because what you're saying essentially is that the performance of not agreeing with someone is more important than what you actually believe or what the actual truth is. And I think that my role is in some ways as an anchor in this format is to be a bit of a representative for the people at home who are like, you're not answering the question. Just answer the question. Or like, that doesn't make any sense.
I really appreciated that. I felt that you really hunted Scott Jennings down on that, and you finally got him to actually answer the question, sort of.
Well, I also think if you believe something controversial, own it.
Yes.
Like, go ahead. If you think that what should happen is that the president should direct the Fed, then great. But you
Yeah.
got to own it. Don't try to slide in. You don't try to slide into your position without actually taking ownership of what it means. And I think that's an important part of what I try to get people to do is like, let's really understand what you're saying here, and let's take all the frills away, the wordsmithing away, and really get to the heart of the matter.
Okay, so Abby, you talk about owning it or owning the idea, and earlier you referenced the fact you worked at the Washington Post. How do you think Jeff Bezos is emerging right now as the owner of the Washington Post?
I think it's like all the other people of his class who are businessmen, in the tech world who have business before this government, they're all trying to figure out how to get close to Trump. And I think that it's unfortunate what's happened at the Post. I mean, it's sad to watch that paper. What I grew up in Maryland, it's my hometown paper. It was my dream to work there. And I loved working there. And I worked there after he bought the paper when he infused it with funds, and Marty Baron was there. And I was part of the team that was helping to kind of make the Washington Post quicker online and sort of develop a more of a digital identity around breaking news. And so it was actually a great time. And I think it's very telling that some of those very people that I worked with then are all gone now. All of them.
And do you still read it?
I do, yeah. And I think that the people who are working there are fighting the good fight. It's just really hard to see that kind of institutional knowledge, which is what makes the Post great, go out the door. I think that we cannot underestimate the degree to which that hurts a paper of the Washington Post caliber.
Let me ask you this. If you could accidentally be added to a signal chat by a cabinet secretary, which one would you want it to be? What would you like it to be about?
Okay, who's my favorite
Oh,
cabinet
yeah.
secretary?
Yes.
So many of them, so many to choose from.
So many.
Maybe Christy Nome.
Mhm.
I need to know what happened with the
We've
purse
just been
and the
discussing her bag.
$3,000 in cash. I must know. This is
Yes.
of utmost
I
importance.
think she was planning to flee the country. She had a passport. She had $3,000
passport.
in cash,
There were-
which, if you're from North Dakota, probably you think's going to get you a long way. And
The passport thing is what got me on that story. It's also like even more incredible because as the head of the Department of Homeland Security, which I mean basically is like responsible for who gets to be here or not and who gets to come back into the country, having your passport, I'm like, who travels with their passport
Like, what
domestically?
in the world is
that's why I think she was
happening?
planning to flee. I think she was planning to flee.
I just want to know more. I just pure curiosity. I want to be on because I feel like there's stuff happening that would be interesting to be accidentally invited in on in terms of conversation
Oh
over there.
my gosh, no kidding. That is like, you know what? That's like two members of a family traveling on separate planes. You never put all the things that are important in your life and valuable in one sack. And then if you do, you'll have to strap it to your body. Like
Also,
what?
can you imagine? Can you imagine being that thief? Because once they catch him, and they will, because it was on CCTV, right? He's going to be sent to El Salvador. I mean,
Oh
what
yeah.
a mistake to
Yeah.
take her bag. That
Oh
is the
yeah.
one person you do not want to.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it. And but I still don't understand how that could happen. But
Well, you have to read
there
the story in The Beast, Abby, because we describe how the guy comes in, sits in a chair facing her back. So he's got her back to her back. And then she's put her bag under the chair and he slides his leg back and pulls the bag towards him and
what
then
kind of
puts his
bag was it,
jacket.
Joanna?
I don't know. That's the bit I don't know.
Oh my God, I asked the same question. I want to know. I want to know.
Because if it was like a Birkin or something, it's like, I mean, don't put it under the chair.
I think it was a Gucci bag. I think I read it was a $3,000 or $4,000 bag. And she was also spotted wearing a very expensive Rolex.
Yes, she has been wearing that $60,000 Rolex, including to El Salvador.
These people,
So
I wouldn't trust a person carrying $3,000 cash in their bag plus a passport. I wouldn't trust any person with with the contents of their bag comprised of those things. Absolutely not one person. It's just not trustworthy.
Abby, let me ask you something else. We discussed the Washington Post. What do you think about what's happening at CBS? Bill Owen, the editor of the great 60 Minutes, has left, saying that he was getting interference and it wasn't how he could do the show anymore, their flagship show. What are your thoughts about that?
we just had a great conversation about that on the show. And, the price of entry, I think, for the corporate people and corporate entities that own news organizations, this includes the Washington Post, is some kind of capitulation to Trump on things that are important to him. And when it comes to CBS, he's been mad about CBS for a long time. Remember he walked out on Leslie Stahl in that interview years ago. And so he's been upset about that for a long time. But the question I have for the people who are running these companies is, when do you think it will be enough? At
Hmm.
what point do you think you would have given enough to Trump that he will leave you alone and give you what you want? I think that is the question right now. And
Yeah.
as somebody who's covered Trump, I am not sure they understand that the answer might not be, oh, we just give him that little thing and he'll be fine and then we'll be able to get our sale. I
Yeah.
think that the Trump 2.0 mode right now is like, let's destroy it all. And I'm not sure that he would be satisfied until CBS, the Washington Post, and all of his other, as he describes it, his enemies are essentially destroyed. And so you really have to think about, how far are you willing to go? And is it going to be worth it? And I'm not sure that they're really thinking this all the way through, because I think there's a sense that, oh, maybe if we give a little bit here and a little bit there, everything will be fine. And I think that might be a colossal miscalculation.
Oh, yeah.
It's extraordinary. I didn't know that Bill Owens was only the third EP or editor of 60 Minutes. What that tells you about that piece of American society is that this is not a sort of like go where the wind blows news organization. And I think to damage the reputation of these types of institutions is so dangerous, because it is so easy to destroy a reputation. It is so hard to build it. So I think people need to think very carefully about what they are willing to chip away at in this moment, because it's not going to be easy to get it back.
Could not agree more. Couldn't agree more.
We had Andrew Cuomo on the podcast last week, who, as you know, is also from Queens, like Trump is. And he said that the thing that you have to understand with Trump, with whom he's had many dealings over the year, is that the minute Trump pokes you in the chest, if you don't poke him straight back, he will just push you against the wall, and that you have to meet force with force. And the idea of compromising makes no sense to Trump. He just sniffs weakness. And I just spent this week, I spent yesterday with a couple of tech friends, one of whom used to work closely with Mark Zuckerberg, who said that the assumption was that Mark turning up at the inauguration meant that somehow the antitrust suit against him, which is currently rolling through the courts, as we all know, would not happen, that they would get some kind of compromise. And it does seem like Trump is just, he doesn't care how much you capitulate. He just wants more.
He just wants more.
That's exactly my point. I think it's just, the truth is that if you know the people who are kind of behind the ideological underpinnings of what Trump wants to do now that he has the presidency for a second time, they're not interested in just kind of taking a swipe at the media. I think they really want a complete overhaul of the entire hierarchy, the system that we live in on all fronts: economics, media, law, politics, everything. So I don't think that are just going to be interested in a weakening of CBS, a weakening of the Washington Post. So just as I think that's the baseline, everybody needs to understand that and act accordingly. And I think that that's when we look at what's happening with Harvard. I think that is also what we're seeing there, is that there's really only one entity, maybe two or three, okay, that can do what they're doing right now. And so if they don't do it, no one will do it. So that's why that particular legal fight is extremely important, because I think it is going to test what happens when the only people who can push back actually push back, and what happens next.
You went to Harvard.
Yeah, you must be
I
so
did.
proud. You must
Yeah.
be so proud, extra proud now. Now you can just say it out loud. You don't have to say, I went to school in the Boston
Well,
area.
look, I mean, I went to Harvard, but I'm not like, look, when I was growing up, I was the only person I knew who ever went to Harvard. So it was a strange land for me when I went there. And Harvard has a lot of ups and downs and good things and bad things. But I think it's just a simple fact that they've got a lot of power in the educational ecosystem. They have a lot of money. They are larger than some entire countries' economies. they have to decide what they're going to do in this moment. And I think that, just anecdotally, because people are constantly texting me about this and the conversation in the Harvard community, and this has been written about, donations have skyrocketed. I think there has been a unity that this moment has created among people affiliated with the university, including Jewish students and Hillel and all of these other entities, Jewish entities that are on campus, to say this is a bridge too far. And I'm not sure that's what Trump was expecting, but that's been the result. And the university needs to take seriously not only how do they respond to Trump, but also um, what are they going to do to make sure that something like this never happens again? Which means, okay, how did it get to this point? Are they getting ahead of what's happening on their own campuses so that it doesn't become a headline that can be politicized by any politician down the road?
This was great. This was a great conversation. I've enjoyed hearing from you. I think you are a
Thanks,
great
Sam.
voice out there, and I'm just so happy that you're doing what you're doing. And it's just a very entertaining show to witness and so uncomfortable in the best possible way.
Well, and congratulations on the 5 too. I mean, I feel that television may be withdrawing, but Abby Phillips is Abby Phillip. I should say.
Yes.
There's no S at the end of
No,
your name. Abby Phillip is on the rise.
we're cannibalizing 6 out of the 7 days of people's weeks, which is great. And Joanna, you're so great on Table for Five, which is the Saturday show, which I think we try to make it a little bit more laid back, but then sometimes things get a little heated there too. But I've been so happy with how the show has turned out. I was very nervous about this format going into it, thinking that it would just be kind of like another boring round table. But I think what makes it good is just the awkwardness, Sam.
Yes, I
The
agree.
awkwardness. It feels very awkward.
Just a tad uncomfortable
Yep.
because it's like real.
Yes.
And that moment is when people realize, oh, wait, this is real life. And I think that's what makes it super interesting. And I love walking out of the studio every night and being like, well, that was unexpected. Like, whoa, what just happened there? Because I like being surprised by my own show.
Oh my, that's great.
Yeah. All right. Well, Abby, thank you for
Thank
joining
you
us.
so
Great
much.
to have you. And we look forward to watching your continued success.
Thank you, Joanna. Thanks, Sam.